Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, the Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 11th of May 2024. Just before we get into the military aid and equipment segment, I'm just going to talk about that strike on Donetsk, HIMARS strike on Donetsk, that is apparently a hit on a 10th anniversary commemoration in Donetsk, so military gathering. So expect there to be quite an effect on possibly levels of troops, as in officers maybe there, but also a number. It could be a significant troop accumulation. Talks to there being an intelligence leak, or Ukrainians having a good handle on intelligence in the area for them to be able to strike that, and that may well give you some indication as to why we are seeing really high losses of personnel at the moment if this kind of stuff is now happening, as HIMARS appear to be back on the menu for the Russians in terms of what they receive. Right, going to military aid and equipment. Here we are going to start with Politico reporting on US plans to announce a new package of military aid to Ukraine worth $400 million. Obviously, they have a lot of leeway to provide consistent aid packages going on probably till the end of this year, stuff like this to keep the Ukrainians going. The 400 million is a really decent sized package, and of course they still have, I don't know how much they still got left of the presidential drawdown authority and USAI from the last set of kit, because I think the last packages that they've already received came out of that, and I don't think it left too much. So this might be dipping into the new appropriations bill that passed, but nonetheless, this is good news for the Ukrainians. It includes Patriot missiles, Stinger surface-to-air missiles, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, mine-resistant and protection vehicles, Javelin anti-armor systems, and other munitions. And I think things like M113. So there's been some discussion about what this may entail. There are some numbers here. And Colby Badwar talks about this, saying we've got Patriot missiles, AMRAAMs for NASAMS, so that's surface-to-air missiles for the air defences, for the NASAMS air defence, Stinger missiles for the MANPADS, man-portable air defence missiles. That's really useful because we've seen a bit of a lack of them. There was close air support over Chasiv Yar and Avdiivka by the Russian airplanes that you're thinking they should be shot down by MANPADS. Why? They just ran out of MANPADS, evidently. Air defence integration equipment, additional HIMARS launchers, plus ammunition. So that's interesting. So in this aid package, you have more HIMARS vehicles. 155mm and 105mm artillery ammo, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, M113 APCs, MRAPs. So that's likely to be, I don't know whether you're going to include Humvees in that or whether they're going to be more substantial MRAPs. I don't know. TOW, Javelin, and AT4 missiles. So missiles for your Javelins on the shoulder, also your TOWs on the Bradleys, and AT4 missiles, so generally anti-tank missiles to fire. JDAM ERs, so they are using JDAMs to the point where they need more of them, so that's good news. Those are the dumb bombs that have been given guided glide kits, so that they can, exactly what the Russians use with their carb bombs, so the Ukrainians can hit further with those bombs. HARMS, so that's anti-radiation missiles. They are missiles you fire from planes that then will home in on radars being active. That will be for things like air defense systems like the S-300. You can take out the radar there. Small arms and ammo and other miscellaneous equipment. And indeed, some people have tried to work out the numbers placed. So military aid to Ukraine updated with items listed are taken from the difference between the latest and previous US aid fact sheets. So doing a bit of maths, it looks like that, but take this with a pinch of salt, it looks like that new $400 million package might include 100 Bradleys, 100 M113 armoured personnel carriers, 30 counter-artillery and mortar radars, 20 multi-mission radars, 20 trailers to transport heavy equipment, 8 coastal and riverine patrol boats, and 1 HIMARS. But that could differ. There's no mention there of MRAPs, though. That would be interesting to know what they were and how many. but that's good news. So talking about 100 Bradleys, Rob Lee then responds to this and says, well, Oryx has tracked 78 Bradleys that were destroyed, damaged, abandoned, or captured by Russian forces. The actual figure of losses is likely higher. Plus, you've got maintenance issues that the Ukrainians have themselves complained about. So 100 should be sufficient to replace those losses. It'd be great if they had even more, but they might have received some already in a last package. And here's an indication. So this is every day Euromaidan Press takes reporting from Ukraine. So reporting from Ukraine does those videos every day of particular areas on the battlefield and gives you some detail about what's gone on there. Now, this is worth mentioning anyway. I probably should have talked through this in the last video, but the frontline report here intimates that Ukraine has halted Russian advance in the Ocheratina area. So this is a North Avdiivka area where the Russians have had some serious success in attacking. And then the Ukrainians have halted that and then launched a counterattack with US military aid. So we're going to join this a little bit later. This is basically a text version of the video. They noted that Ukrainian commanders closely monitored the area with reconnaissance drones and did not allow the soldiers to become encircled or overrun. Geolocated, so these are existing Ukrainian soldiers. Geolocated footage confirms this as Ukrainians released many combat footage pieces showcasing evacuations of frontline troops with Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. These Bradleys are more heavily armoured than regular transports and are able to provide covering fire while loading the infantry. So the Bradleys have got good reputation for having extra survivability over and above what the Ukrainians previously were using. After withdrawing from critical or dangerous positions, Ukrainian forces unleashed a barrage on Russian forces in Solovyovy and Novobakhmativka. Geolocated footage shows Ukrainian drone operators engaging Russian tanks, APCs, and numerous groups of infantry east of Novobakhmativka with FPV kamikaze drones. Ukrainians also conducted multiple FPV strikes on Russian armour and infantry in the settlements. Ukrainian drone operators started equipping their drones with heavier explosives to be able to target groups of Russian infantry hiding in the houses. And I've shown you some bits and pieces from today and previous days on the capability of these drones and how they are evolving. Anyway, Ukrainians continue these attacks day and night, performing a series of attacks on Russian infantry and armoured troop transports with grenade drops and FPV kamikaze drones. So they're becoming part of, as I've mentioned before, these combined arms maneuvers, these drones. Drones are now just absolutely integrated into the Ukrainian warfare. Ukrainian artillery crews also targeted Russian reinforcements being dropped off with MTLB amphibious personnel carriers. Ukrainians engaged these transports with artillery and finished off the infantry themselves with cluster munitions. So again, this is an indication that some of the US equipment has found its way to the front lines. Russian forces had even attempted to break out of the Ukrainian kill zone, but were halted by anti-tank mines, instantly destroying the assault group. A Ukrainian military blogger stated that Russian forces have been unable to break through Ukrainian defences here, adding that Russian losses in this direction were the highest alongside the Russian salient. So when you then look at the Ukrainian general staff figures saying you've got really high Russian losses over the last couple of days, like into almost record figures, we've got insanely high numbers of Russian equipment being lost, and that can be explained by Kharkiv. You know, that's going to be attritional for the Russians attacking up there, but also in the places where the Russians have had success recently, like Avdiivka area, where the Ukrainians are now tooled up and can hit back and are apparently smashing up some of the Russian units here. So as the Russian advance, so this is where we get to talk about the Bradleys in a second. So as the Russian advance in this direction was completely halted, the Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade slowly started pushing the Russians back. Geolocated footage shows that the Ukrainian Bradley infantry fighting vehicle engaged a Russian T-80 tank with a tow-guided anti-tank missile. I showed you that video yesterday, destroying the Russian tank on impact. Another geolocated footage video shows a Bradley engaging a Russian armoured transport vehicle dropping off the Russian reinforcements. The Bradley's powerful automatic cannon opened fire on the Russian vehicle, destroying it almost instantly. This left the Russian infantry stranded in the tree line, fully viewing the Bradley's weapon system. Interestingly enough, if we look at the paint scheme of the Ukrainian Bradley, we can see it is equipped with the desert-style camouflage. Okay, so all of me talking through this isn't really relevant for my military aid package, but I thought this gives you a sense of how the evidence is brought together by reporting from Ukraine. And when we get to this point, Western vehicles in Ukraine have previously been equipped with the green camouflage, the pixelated camouflage, which is the Ukrainian style, indicating that this Bradley has only just arrived and is part of the recent US aid package sent to Ukraine. And we saw some of these Bradleys early doors. So when that package was first, when the bill was first got through Congress, there were images that came out of some Bradleys and other vehicles at, I think it was somewhere maybe in Poland or Germany, and they had the desert camo. Obviously just ready to go to Ukraine. Ukraine would normally have received these, been getting ready for, let's say, the last May's counteroffensive, received them ahead of the counteroffensive, painted them up in the Ukrainian way, and then got them to the front line. These have been, right, we don't have time to paint them. They need them in Avdiivka right now, and they've just shipped them right in. And this suggests that these are from the last military aid package. Due to the critical shortages in weapons systems and munitions Ukrainians have been suffering from, there was no time to re-equip the Bradley with a new paint scheme, as it was urgently needed on the front line. Overall, Russian forces attempted to overpower Ukrainian defences by outflanking them from the east, but ended up in a kill zone. The Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade had carefully withdrawn from the area under cover of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and then they prepared the area with anti-tank mines, which proved critical in halting the advance of the larger Russian force. And then in the kill zone, they just finish them off with Bradleys and drones and whatnot. So, yeah, that is what reporting from Ukraine says, but it indicates that the Ukraine is already using those initial Bradleys. Breaking news, US Secretary of State Blinken has invoked the emergency clause of the AECA to authorize an immediate foreign military sale of 3 HIMARS vehicles to Ukraine. So this was the news I hit you with yesterday, that Germany has funded 3 HIMARS, and they're buying them essentially off US stocks, but they may already be ready to go across the border. This sale is from US Army stock and is being financed by Germany at an estimated cost of $30 million. I expect the actual LOA value to be lower. I don't know whether that means that Germany will end up paying less than that, or that the Americans will make a profit. I don't know what that quite means. But German aid to Ukraine says things are moving fast. Spoke to Colby about this. Colby Badwa, who's with part of the Tochny group, the German aid to Ukraine is part of. And by the way, I'm appearing on Tochny tomorrow night, Sunday night UK time, Sunday evening, so check that out. And he said it might be possible that the 3 German-financed M142 HIMARS are in Ukraine within the next 24 hours if they are already in Poland. A couple of days if they had to fly them from the US to Poland. There is also now the confirmation of the costs, $30 million of the contract. Spiegel had previously reported the contract value at 30 million euros. So those HIMARS could be bought, paid for, and in Ukraine like now. So that's really good news. Unmanned high-ranking military sources told, unnamed, not unmanned, they're just a robot. I am telling you this. Unnamed high-ranking military sources told media that the first F-16 jets from Western allies will arrive in Ukraine by or in June to July, without specifying the supplier. So it looks like F-16s are on course for being operational, because you're not going to get there and keep them without flying them, because they just become a risk to being hit. So if they are going to be in Ukraine June to July, they're going to be using them in June to July. Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair's $55.5 million pledge aims to enhance Ukraine's air defences with the German initiative. So this is the IAAD, the German air defence initiative that they are getting Canada to give some money towards. I think they've got about somewhere around $400 million at the moment that's been pledged towards buying things. Well, they need to get hold of a new Patriot radar, don't they, for a start? Because there seems to be one that is not working, hasn't been working for some time. So Flash News says, since the beginning of 2024, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has commissioned 9 Ukrainian robotic systems. They perform a variety of tasks on the battlefield. So these are whole systems that the Ukraine has said, yep, we will buy a bunch of those from indigenous, I think, sources. They perform a variety of tasks on the battlefield, reducing the risk of our soldiers. So it's not 9 bits of kit, but it's 9 types of which they're producing multiple numbers of. In particular, these combat robots with machine guns, as well as systems for evacuating the wounded and mining. So that's really good news there. And here we have tests of a new Ukrainian naval drone capable of performing various tasks, including logistical and evacuating the wounded. So that drone looks like it's got a sort of stretcher on the back with anti-roll bits on the side. So you could strap a human in there and get them from, say, Krinky back across to the mainland. That would be absolutely brilliant, because the problem is at the moment, A, boats are bigger, and B, they are really susceptible to drones. And you lose humans every time you take a boat across the water and it gets hit. Yes, it costs money, but you'd rather lose a drone than personnel. So if the drone can go and get people from the other bank in Krinky, say, injured, then this is absolutely brilliant. Could be really useful. Now, the Ukrainian justice minister here has said that the 3 billion euros of Russian assets. So you remember, there's been this agreement inside Europe that the Russians are. Sorry, my first video of the day has been demonetized and whatnot. It's been I hate it when it does that, YouTube. I'm gonna release it anyway. Just give it some love, share it, because the algorithm won't get onto it. Anyway, restricted is a word. So this minister, you've got the $3 billion worth of frozen Russian assets profits that are going to be redirected towards Ukraine. That's been agreed by the EU, and that will be happening soon, one hopes. But the Ukrainians were hoping to get hold of the full $210 billion of frozen Russian assets. And of course, that would sort them out for several years in terms of how screwed their economy is. If they can have $210 billion rather than $3 billion a year, you can see why the Ukrainians are like, no. So he's saying this is almost nothing in the context of the war. The EU's expected annual contribution of around 3 billion euros drawn from frozen Russian assets is almost nothing in the context of the full-scale war. Justice Minister Denis Malyuska told Politico in an interview yesterday, if we're talking about the needs of Ukraine and the needs of the war, military and non-military, 3 billion euros is actually almost nothing. We need hundreds of billions in order to win the war. It's a good first step, he added. What I guess is the silver lining here is that those frozen assets aren't going anywhere. So if the war comes to some kind of a close, then the EU, I assume, would say, right, those are going to go towards those are going to go towards Ukrainian reparations. Either Russia pays those reparations and we give this stuff back to Russia to the tune of 210 billion, or they don't give Ukraine 210 billion and we give Ukraine these assets. So that could well be the way forward. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is this. So I dipped into this video at the beginning of it. I'm going to play you toward the end of it, basically. This is the 3D printer that the British have devised to make metal parts for equipment, for military equipment on the front lines. And some people, yes, they were like, I don't know if they were people who are slightly more aligned with the Russian way of thinking, were saying, yeah, it's rubbish, it's not what you think it is, it's not going to be good enough, naysaying. But these guys, and speaking to the people who operate it and people who provide it, saying this could be a bit of a game changer.
To put this into context for us, could this be a
game changer? You're going to ask. I'm just going to turn him up a bit.
Game changer.
I think it's a really important piece of kit. Actually, I was having a briefing with some security contacts, and they were telling me that Russia was really struggling with its war in Ukraine because they weren't able to replace a lot of the components that were needed to keep tanks and armoured vehicles working, and as a result, they were sending these vehicles into battle without necessary kit, without the sort of sophisticated things that they needed to actually work effectively. And whereas the British Army have obviously come up with quite an interesting solution, and I think if they can really upscale it and get more of these printers and things printed much faster than they are at the moment, then it could be a game changer, I think.
You mentioned Ukraine. Could this be used to help the Ukrainians?
So the Ukrainians have been given some of these printers. They're not quite at the stage where they could move these printers to the front line quickly. The British have managed to adapt these printers to make them more accessible for the military. However, the Ukrainians have got them, and they are using them to produce basic components that they will need. So yeah, they're already in use.
How long do you think it'll be until other countries have similar technology they're able to use?
I think the key here is
question.
that other countries are obviously already looking at 3D printing. You've already had Formula One use 3D printers, but the British military is the first military that's used these 3D printers on a NATO exercise, and also have adapted them so they can be sent in a shipping container on a truck to a front line, basically. So I think that other countries will probably catch up quite quickly.
And I assume that given the UK's membership of NATO, there'll be a lot of cooperation here and maybe sharing of this technology. Would that happen among NATO members?
Yeah, and they've been showing NATO members over the last few weeks how they've been using these 3D printers. They're currently on exercise Steadfast Defender, which is the largest NATO exercise since the end of the Cold War. And these printers are being used for that purpose, to make sure that kit's ready and able to be used as part of the exercise. So yes, I think that they want to work with NATO to be able to develop the technology further.
So when people say, "Oh no, load of rubbish," they're literally using them in the NATO exercises, and they are providing parts for NATO vehicles that need parts. Quite often, as was discussed yesterday, quite often in vehicles that no longer, I'm not saying in the NATO exercises, but the idea is that the Ukrainians are using vehicles that you can no longer get the parts for. Old UK vehicles that have been out of service for 20 years are now being used in Ukraine. They've got off the private market, that you don't have a logistics chain for them. But even for things like Bradleys that they've been struggling, they've been sent Bradleys over from the US and not been sent enough spare parts and the wherewithal to get these sort of fixed up. And so that delays things. Well, if you have a 3D printing unit or a set of these things around Ukraine, then you can make these parts to order and get these vehicles up and running much more quickly. So I think this really is an important development, and I don't think we should poo-poo this at all. I think this is really good news, and if Ukraine are getting their hands on this from Britain, I think that's excellent news for the Ukrainians. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you a little bit later today.